Hey, what's happening, guys? Chris Martinez here, host of Operation Agency Freedom, the #1 podcast in the universe, and especially for agency folks. How is everybody doing today? We are going to talk about more hiring stuff. So everybody's hiring, everybody's looking for people. What I want to talk about in today's episode are the red flags that you need to look out for in evaluating candidates. I think all of us have hired somebody at one time that we felt didn't live up to their expectations, or that basically turned out to be a completely different person than they were when they were in the interview. And the reality is that there are always red flags that either we consciously or unconsciously ignored for various reasons. And, there's always going to be people that slip through the cracks. We have an unbelievably difficult hiring process here at Dude. And 99 times out of 10, we get it right, or 99 times out of 100, I should say. 99 times out of 100, we get it right. But every once in a while, there's somebody that slips through the cracks and that, just as it ends up not being a great fit. So it's bound to happen. But doesn't mean that we can't continually try to improve the process so that all the team members that we do bring on, we have a very, very good likelihood of success. So if you're hiring people right now and you want to learn the red flags to look out for in the interview process, then definitely listen to this podcast. I know that most of us did not receive training on how to hire people in an agency environment. And the other crazy thing is that the skill sets that we need are constantly changing. Everything in this industry changes all the time. You probably heard many people say that the agency world is like dog years. Everything on the internet, it changes constantly. So that also means that we have to constantly change the metrics that we're using to evaluate candidates. So make sure that you listen to all this episode. Anything that I reference, it will be on the show notes on the website on the candidates.The podcast page. So make sure that you go check that out. If there's anything that you want to reference or see that I mentioned on the episode. And of course, if you have not already subscribed, please do me a huge favor and subscribe to this podcast. It's the only way that we're going to stay the #1 podcast in the universe. You have to subscribe. So with that being said, let's head over and we'll listen to the entire episode. All right, welcome back. Hey, this is a topic where if there's an award for making all of these mistakes, give it to this guy right here, because I have made every single hiring mistake that you possibly can. Obviously, I wasn't trying to make those mistakes, but I just wasn't trained. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to look for. I had certain biases. I had certain things that I would look for in candidates, and it was the wrong things. So actually, let me tell you a quick story first. So, like my very first job out of college was working in sales, and I quickly became a manager. I was one of the youngest managers that they had in the company. At one point, I was supposed to be managing 4 people, but at one point I ended up managing 10. Part of that is because I was an absolutely awful sales manager. I did get some training though, and that helped me out quite a bit. But it was really, really hard because our employees kept churning out. They kept going and getting jobs. At the time, it was pharmaceutical sales. They all wanted to go do pharmaceutical sales. So they would come to us, we would hire them, they would get amazing training. They would work with us for a year, and then they'd go get a pharmaceutical job. So we would constantly be having these job fairs, right? And the HR team would say like, oh, who do you need? Like, give us the profile of somebody that you need. So we would list out these things, think of like boiler room type of things, like not really knowing what we were looking for as well. And I think part of the problem is that we were really, really good salespeople in the sense that we could communicate well. We had good work ethic. We had good discipline, but we weren't actually asking for those things in the interview. We weren't telling HR the non-surface things that we needed to see, like numbers, right? Like, what have they done? How have they shown us that they can hit goals? What sales training have they actually conducted? What is the past history, their past sales history look like? Things like that. Like, we were really just evaluating based on surface metrics, and I think subconsciously we were like, do they look like us? Which was a gigantic mistake. Now that we've gotten some training, and luckily we have amazing people that do all of our hiring, so I'm not there there to screw it all up. But now we know the proper way to do an interview so that we can pull out these red flags. Your interview process is designed to prove that somebody is not good enough to work for you. It's not to prove that somebody is good enough to work for you. It's to prove that somebody is not good enough to work for you. So let me give you a few tips when it comes to hiring in general, just in case you've never heard this before. So the first one is never ever hire out of desperation. Don't ever make any decisions out of desperation. Try and always have a cool head, but never hire out of desperation, because when you do that, you're going to overlook all these red flags, because all you're focusing on is my pain that I'm feeling right now. And I will do anything to avoid feeling like this anymore. And then you overlook a lot of problems. And then the reality is that you end up creating a lot more problems for yourself down the road. So never ever hire out of desperation. Second one, and this is one that we really tiptoe on when we don't have good hiring practices, never hire someone who isn't 1,000% the right fit. If there's any inkling that shows that this person is not exactly the person that you need, do not hire them. It's really important that you only hire the people that you're totally confident and know both empirically and from a feeling perspective that this person is going to help your company to be successful. It's really important. I say this because we have big hearts in the agency space. We want to help people. We want to see the best in them. We want to see them succeed. But at some point, you got to put your foot down and be like, this person just doesn't have it. Let me give you an example. So in our company, we hire a lot of people in Mexico. We've had a lot of amazing people that have come through, but they didn't speak English. And one of the requirements for us, and we do have tests for this, is that they have to speak English. They had everything going for them, but they just didn't speak the language well enough. So we said, hey, this is the reason, and you can go out and learn English and definitely apply. And, some of those folks never came back, but I can tell you that a lot of the rock stars actually went out, invested their own time, learned the language, came back, got a job, and now they're crushing it, right? So that really tests their character, and you can see if they come back and they've gone out and learned the language on their own. Think about that. Like, have any of your employees ever gone out there and learned a new language to get a new job? Probably not. But these folks have demonstrated that commitment to themselves and their success and their desire to work for our company. So those people end up doing very well with us. So that's another benefit of telling somebody that they're not the right fit when they're not the right fit. If they're the perfect candidate, they'll figure out a way to come back and get the job. Next thing is don't ever rush the process. And this is kind of tied to don't hire out of desperation. If you have a hiring process that you know that works, do not try and circumvent the process just because you really like somebody or you feel like they're going to get swooped up by somebody else. Don't rush, right? We're not desperate. If it's going to be a good fit, like I'm not saying drag your feet because you feel like this person's going to be there forever, but at the same time, don't skip steps. If you require the person to take a test, make sure they take the freaking test, right? There's no reason why they can't take the test the same day or why the test has to take like 3 days or anything like that. Give them the test, get them through the process, but don't rush the process and don't skip steps in the process. And then finally, like everybody has to be measured by the same standards. This is why I recommend that you do some parts of the interview with the camera off. So essentially a phone interview, because we all have biases. We all have things that will cause us to like or dislike somebody based on the way that they look, based on the way that they show up, based on the way that they talk, based on all these little factors, and most of them are subconscious. We all have these biases. One of the ways that you are going to build a successful team moving forward is that you can find diamonds in the rough. You essentially are able to, what I call moneyball your team, right? You can put together a team of people who have all these amazing skill sets and might be located in places that nobody else is looking, but you found the perfect team members to help you grow. And of course, they all fit within the budget too. So the way that you get there is that you have to have the same evaluation standards for everybody. So I'm not saying give anybody a handout, or definitely don't push somebody through if they don't have the requirements, right? I just mentioned before, don't rush the process. But you also want to make sure that the standards are very well defined and clear cut. So then you can see this person's good enough, this person is not. Then you won't be overlooking any diamonds in the rough. You also will not be overlooking, you won't be overvaluing, that's the word I'm looking for. You won't be overvaluing people that really aren't as good of a fit. Okay, so let's get into these red flags that I'm talking about. Okay, so the first one, and this is one that I've seen quite a bit, is blaming, right? So why did you leave your last job? Oh, my last boss was an asshole. He didn't value me. He didn't see my skills. They didn't give me the talent. I didn't get that management position. Essentially, that is not taking ownership of the problem. And it's probably not even a real problem. It's probably a problem with the individual. But blaming in general is an absolute massive red flag. Now, if they say something like, my boss never paid me, that's not blaming. That's a fact. If they say something like, my boss never paid me, so I stole a car from the place, clearly that's bad. But there, you do have to take into consideration the life experiences or, the situation that they were working on, the environment that they were working in. But blaming is pretty easy to see. Essentially, if they are not taking responsibility for a misstep in the company or a challenge that they experienced, and you can see, hey, like if that happened in my company, I would want you to say like, this was my mistake. This is my fault. So blaming, that's the absolute number one. Yeah, like if they are going into the interview blaming for their problems, like where they stand in life, not happening. Get them out. The second one is going to be, and this is one that people often overlook because the individual is so nice, but having no technical ability. You do need to have some technical ability. You don't necessarily have to know how to run a Google AdWords campaign. You don't necessarily have to know how to build a website from scratch. You don't necessarily have to know how to run a Facebook ad campaign, but you have to know enough to be dangerous. In my experience, this happens with account managers all the freaking time. If agencies go out there and they hire somebody who is very, very nice, who communicates well and can do half the job well, but doesn't understand the technical side, it just takes way too long to get them trained up on that. And then what happens is that they're going to screw up a relationship with a client. They're going to set a wrong expectation. Something happens and you're going to have churn. Those clients are going to cancel. They have to have some level of technical ability. Now, how can you test for that? Or give a test. Like there's literally tests out there where you can create a standardized test and then you give that test to every single person who interviews for that position. But yeah, they have to have some level of technical ability. All right. This is another red flag is when you're interviewing somebody and they don't give you examples of work experience. So a lot of agencies and just people in general, they make this mistake of what would you do if, and then they'll list out a scenario. Well, that's a bad way of asking that question. And here's why. Everybody knows what the textbook answer is. We don't want the textbook answer. We want to see what their past history was. The greatest predictor of future behavior is going to be previous behavior. So the proper way that you want to ask that question is, tell me about a time when, and then you list that out. Tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with the client and you had to talk them through and get them to see your point of view, right? If they continually dance around that question, that's a red flag. Somebody with the right experience and the ability to be able to communicate, they can very, very easily remember that scenario and they can tell you exactly what happened and how they resolved it every single time. If you ask me tell me about a time when, I can recall a specific scenario very, very quickly. I don't think that I'm unique. I don't think that I'm like a genius and I have instant recall. Actually, I can guarantee you I don't have instant recall because I can't remember shit. But if you give me that question and give me a scenario, if I'd done it, I can recall and I'll be able to tell you what that is very, very easily. So that's the third red flag is that they can't give you specific examples to that. Tell me about a time when type of question. The fourth red flag is that they are very combative or defensive. Well, no, I've seen it equally both on design and development. There's just one person in particular that, when we start to question their work or ask them questions in general, they've gotten very, very defensive. Like, how dare you ask me this question? My resume speaks for itself. If you meet anybody like that, just get them the fuck out of your office right away. Like, we do not need to hire you. It will be a gigantic prima donna pain in the ass. So get them out of there. That's the fourth one. That one got me a little bit heated. The next one is going to be thinking that their work is perfect. So we like to ask the question, what's your favorite thing in your portfolio, right? And they'll be like, this one, da, 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 da. Okay, cool. If you could do that over again, what would you do differently to improve it? Most people will find something that they think that they could do differently. Sometimes though, you get people who are like, no, nothing. It's perfect, right? That is a sign. If they say, it's perfect, it wouldn't change a thing. That's a sign that the person might be hard to coach. And in an environment where we're working in a team and people are going to make mistakes because they're people, you need to have somebody who has the humility to acknowledge that they are not perfect and that there's always room for improvement. So you want to look for that. That's a giant red flag. If they think that their work is perfect or a previous thing that they did is perfect and they wouldn't change anything, that's typically a red flag. Next one is working with other people. If they don't like working with other people, which happens a lot with very, very technical folks, like really, really talented design developers, sometimes they don't like working with other people, right? And that's okay. Like it's okay if your work environment, if your workspace, you need it to be quiet or whatever, but you do need to be able to get along with other people. You need to be aware about other people's feelings and just basically not be an asshole. And some people will very, frankly tell you, I don't like working with other people. And if that's the case, then I would advise you to not hire that individual. The last one, and this is literally the number one reason why people don't get hired by us. And it's a little bit hard to measure if you don't know how to do it. This is kind of like a dude specialty, but do not hire people that don't care about the big picture. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. A lot of people that are out there in the creative world, all they want to do is like make creative stuff. They just want to like develop really cool things. And they don't necessarily care about the impact of their work on others, on the client, on the company, on the client's client, right? So we work with agencies. So we not only need that team member to care about the other team members that are on their team, we not only need them to care about the company, we not only need them to care about the agency, but we also need them to care about the agency's customer. Because ultimately, if the agency's customer is successful, then the agency is successful. If the agency is successful, then the company is successful. If the company is successful, then the team is successful. If the team is successful, then the individual is successful. Not everybody is wired to look at things like that, and not everybody is wired to give a shit. That's something that we screen for. Ultimately, we are looking for people that are willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the team. If you're listening to this, by the way, and you're like thinking like, that's not me, I'm not willing to sacrifice myself for the good of the team, that's a problem. And you probably shouldn't be running a team, and maybe you should just be a freelancer or something. But most of the time, these are the values that you hold dear to you, and you need to see those same values reflected in your team members. I'm telling you, this is the number one reason why technical people do not get hired by us. And unfortunately, when I see an agency that's struggling with a team member, so like here's the scenario, this happens all the time actually. You have a superstar developer and they've come in and they can do all this cool shit, and they can run the whole development team. But what happens is that they essentially control the entire department. They haven't trained anybody else. They haven't created any SOPs. Everything is dependent on that person. And that's the way they want it. That's the way they designed it. They are like power hungry, and they do not want anybody else to do anything without their permission or without their oversight. And that person will eventually hold you back and potentially kill your company. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me in some respects. It's a big, big deal, right? And the whole reason why that's happening is that they are not willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the team. That's just not how they're wired. And unfortunately, that individual is probably never going to change. So that's not your fault, right? That's not your responsibility either. Your responsibility is to ensure that your team and that your company is successful, and ultimately that your business helps you to build the life that you've always dreamed of. So you need to move that person out if they're already in the team. But as you're going through the interview process, make sure that you screen for that. And if you find somebody who has that quality, do not ever, ever, ever let that person into your company. They will be so unbelievably toxic and cancerous. So on that happy note, those are all the red flags. So let me just go through them again very quickly. So blaming, somebody who's blaming everybody during the interview process, that's a red flag. If they don't have any technical ability, that's a red flag. If they can't give you examples of past work experience or how they've managed certain situations. So essentially, if you ask them a question, tell me about a time when, and if they don't have a specific example, that's a red flag. If they're combative or defensive when you ask them questions, that's a red flag. If they think that their work is perfect and there's no way to improve their favorite project that they've ever did, that's a red flag. If they don't like working with other people, obviously that's a red flag. And then the last one that I just mentioned is that if they are not willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the team, that's that's also a red flag. So please take that into consideration when you're conducting your interviews and when you're doing your hiring. And of course, if you recognize like, I don't have time to do this stuff, I just want you to find me amazing people and help me place them in my team. And I want you to help me train them. And I want you to help me to improve my operations. That's what we do here at Dude. So just reach out to us and we'll see if we can help you out. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you could share it with your friends, family, and basically anyone who will find the same value in this episode that you did. And to get the latest from me, then let's definitely connect on social media. You can go to Facebook, facebook.com/Dude Agency, or Instagram @dudeagency.io, or you can check us out on YouTube on our YouTube channel. And then, of course, you can always visit our website at dudeagency.io, where you can see all of our other episodes of Operation Agency Freedom. You can also register for any live trainings that we have going on how to run a highly profitable agency. And of course, you can see how we help digital agencies with the people, the processes, and the education so that they can take on more projects and scale profitably. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.